Basics Webinar. My name is Tom Mariola, and I'm a Senior Planner with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program at DACF. These monthly webinars are intended for those that are new to the planning profession. A reminder that these sessions are recorded and posted on our website. I'll post a link to where the recordings are located as soon as Nicole gets started. Before we start, I have, it's transcribing, Joan. Give me a second. Got it. All right, transcription stopped. That's just an annoying thing in the sidebar. I have two quick plugs before Nicole gets started. One, the Begin with Habitat program will be hosting an online lunch and learn on Wednesday, May 21st from noon to 1. They'll introduce the Begin with Habitat program, share new tools, discuss integrating the tools into the planning process, and look to you to learn about questions and your needs. It's specifically about, honestly, that's what they said it was about. But looking at the agenda and what they recently sent out, it looks like it's going to be about their new online tools and the way to integrate those into the comp planning process. So I've already registered for that. I'll be posting a link to that registration as soon as Nicole gets started. So there'll be two links from me shortly. The second plug is our next Planning Basics webinar is Friday, June 6th. The session will be a panel discussion hosted by Greg LeClaire of the Beginning with Habitat program. This session is titled Opening Up About Open Space, a panel discussion on open space planning in Maine. A little different than what Beginning with Habitat is hosting on the 21st of May. Today we are joined by Nicole Lazure. I still got it wrong. Outdoor recreation planner with the Bureau of Parks and Lands at DACF. Nicole has been working on the state's comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. Thank you to Grenée Shaw of KVCOG for recommending this topic. Grenier is here on the call. I saw her pop in. Nicole, it's a pleasure to have you, and you can begin when you're ready.
All right, thanks, Tom. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to meet with these folks. For time's sake, I would love for folks just to use the chat function to just do a quick introduction, maybe where you're based out of, your name and where you're based out of. That would be really helpful for me, so get a sense of where folks are from. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do with the state. So I work for the Bureau of Parks and Lands, and the primary function of my job is to, one component is to write the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And let me go through my slides here. So just do some quick introductions. I'll talk a little bit about the SCORP overview. The planning process that I use for SCORP, how SCORPs relate to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And then for folks that are interested in staying on, I would love your participation in being part of a focus group that collecting information that will help guide the direction of our SCORP and where we go with setting priorities for statewide outdoor recreation. And at any point in time, feel free to put some questions in the chat. I have some time set aside for questions, but Tom, if you want to catch anything, you can, if I miss it, just let me know. Thanks. So I'm new to the States. I just started in September, and I feel like that for a lot of jobs that at this point I should kind of really have my feet under me, but I feel like with the state, there's just so much to learn and so much to do that I feel like I'm still pretty new and I'm still learning things every day. My background, I worked in higher education for about 15 years and Unity College for some time, Thomas College, and I still teach part-time for University of Maine, Machias in their outdoor recreation field. I'm not going to get too much into my professional background, but quick overviews. I worked for the National Park Service in the outdoor recreation field for some time in Acadia National, as close as Acadia National Park and as far away as Denali National Park in Alaska. And most of my positions related to outdoor recreation, wildland firefighting, search and rescue type work, and state park, a little bit of a Massachusetts state park system, as well as some organizations such as the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, and yeah, a little bit about my background before I came to the state. How many people, if you can use your reaction, thumbs up, some sort of reaction, how many people have heard of the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, or SCORP, before? Right, that's helpful. So it looks like we have a fair amount, about half the folks I'm seeing have some sort of familiarity with it. So that's great. So some of this might be review for you, and some of you this might be new. So a little bit about SCORP. It's identifies the primary function of SCORP is to identify statewide demand for and supply of outdoor recreation. It sets planning priorities for towns, agency, tribes, and organizations. And the primary function is that it's used by the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant applicants and grant administrators to determine eligibility. So communities that are interested in applying for a grant are encouraged to use SCORP as sort of their guiding principle. So when we're thinking about writing the SCORP, even though I work for the Bureau of Parks and Land, it's truly a statewide comprehensive plan where it's more geared towards municipalities, so more so than state agencies, even though state agencies receive a lot of money from SCORP, or the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So the SCORP's involved with, it's primarily run through the Bureau of Parks and Lands, so they're the primary developer. We have a steering committee of about 15 members from across the state that represent various diverse sectors in the outdoor recreation field. So I won't list everybody here, but some examples of folks you might know or might have worked with already is Jeff McCabe from the Office of Tourism and the Outdoor Recreation Office. We have John Daigle, who has some tribal representation and is a faculty member at University of Maine. We have Andrew Smart, who works with the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife as a game warden, focused mostly on public access to private lands. Some folks from the Off-Road Vehicle Office. So that's sort of a kind of a brief, and then as well as some of our nonprofit organizations and land trusts, among other members. So just sort of try to get a diverse representation of folks that are involved. And then we have some primary stakeholders that we work with as well. So these are folks that do a lot with outdoor industry within the state. Primary stakeholder would be the folks that are involved in creating the outdoor recreation roadmap. So there's a group of folks, I do have a link to that, so we can look it up if you haven't heard of that one. That was led mostly through the Office of Outdoor Recreation under the tourism, as well as the Maine Outdoor Brands organization. So they just came out with a 10-year strategic plan related to outdoor recreation. So we work with them, and then partners. So that's kind of who's involved in putting together the SCORP. A primary component and necessary component for SCORP in order for it to get approved is public input. And that's where I met with Granier and her team over at the Kennebec Valley Council of City Government and her team. And we try to get a lot of public input. And I learned a little bit more about what their offices do, as well as had a chance to share what we do here. And our public input is three primary sources of ways we get that information. One is through 2 surveys that we put out. So we put out surveys to outdoor recreation providers, and some of you might have gotten that. So if anybody that's related to either managing outdoor recreation directly, so running outdoor recreation programs, or people that manage lands or properties that are used for outdoor recreation. So we have that survey. That one has been out since March. It's currently still live. The other one is the recreation user survey. And that's one we haven't finished writing, so that should be out within the next couple of weeks. And that's primarily focused on the demand. How are we meeting the needs of people that are outdoor recreation users within the state? So those are our 2 primary surveys that we submit. And once they're both up and posted, they'll be open until till September. And then the other ways that we try to get input from the public are focus groups. It's in interviews. So focus groups are anybody that's has certain stakeholders related to outdoor recreation, and I'm trying to. So I'd like to use folks that are interested here as part of the focus group. I'm connecting with certain organizations like the New England. The NEMBAs, the New England Mountain Bike Association groups, private private outdoor recreation business owners, Maine guides, snowmobile clubs. So trying to get as much diverse the organizations related to new Mainers and some of the programming, outdoor recreation programming that do. So trying to get a diverse view of perspectives as we put together the SCORP. And then in addition to that, sometimes focus groups don't always work out, or there's folks that we feel like are more important viewpoints coming from individuals. So we do host individual interviews with folks, which we ask similar questions that we do in the focus groups. And an example of that is the North Maine Woods owns a huge tract of land, and so I interviewed. We also have him on our steering committee to the executive director for the North Maine Woods. So public input is really important. We need to have a documentation of our outdoor recreation supply and documentation of our outdoor recreation demand. So a little bit more about SCORP in the bigger picture is SCORPs are used in all 50 states. So every state has their version of a SCORP. Historically, SCORPs have been needed to be updated every 5 years. So that was the regulations up until a couple months ago. In February, they made the decision to make that optional. So you can update every 5 years, or they've just extended it to every 10 years. So we were originally supposed to have our main SCORP due in September of this year, but we requested an extension because we wanted to move it to a 10-year time frame. So we're going to be thinking a little bit more longer term with our planning and moving it up to a 10-year. So we have another year extension. So our SCORP is actually now going to be due to September 26th. So we have one more year to pull that together, and a little bit more opportunity for public input related to more long term. It needs to be approved by the National Park Service. So this is going to be interesting as we navigate a lot of the changes in federal governments. But we're currently down to one person out of three that have been traditionally staffed in that office that does the reviewing and the approving of that. So that might move our time frame up a little bit. But so it needs to be approved. We draft the document, goes out for public input, and then gets approved by the National Park Service. And then it provides, it provides a base for folks that are interested in applying for land and water conservation funds, state and local funding, and anything funded through LWCF is in perpetuity. So you might have come across that in your city planning work that you do, where if a site is has been funded by the Land and Water Conservation, it needs to be in the form of recreation for forever. And there's lots of ways that are you can work with that if you need to change it or update it that are in a different field than I'm really focused on. So I'm mostly focused on the SCORP part. But if you have questions about that, I can connect you to folks within the Bureau that could help you if you're navigating that. And then so once we go through our planning process, the outcomes are that we have identified outdoor recreation. Each state has a different wording for it. So I've heard themes, which is what we've used traditionally in Maine, priorities, goals, action items. So we come up with a list of priorities within each of those priorities. And it typically ranges from 3 to 5, but there's not a specific requirement for that. 3 to 5 priorities or themes that pop up. And then from there, implementation strategies. And if anybody has looked through the outdoor recreation roadmap that the Office of Tourism and Maine Outdoor Brands published recently, it's set up with a very similar where they have goals and strategies to achieve those. And they're in the process of doing implementation strategies as well. And we have a comprehensive plan. It varies from, I've seen some states as few as 75 pages and some that are like 500 pages. So again, not a whole lot of requirements beyond public input in those two, and documentation of demand, documentation of our supply and the public input process. And we have a comprehensive plan, survey reports. And new this year, we're working with Doug Beck, who is a recreation planner related to all of our grant funding. And we're working towards creating a statewide trails plan. So that's new on our agenda. A lot of states have that as built into their SCORP, and it's a requirement for us to receive some funding through the Maine DOT. So we're trying to be in compliance with that, as well as help unify really the vision of statewide trails. So that's something we're hoping to add this year, and not going to be part of my planning responsibilities, but we'll hopefully be able to hire a contractor to help us with that work. And here's our timeline for, so I came on in September. SCORP was handed to me as a project in November. And December, we created a steering committee. January to March, I started redeveloping the planning phase. From April to September is when we're going to be focusing on the surveys that are going out, our focus groups or interviews, so getting this public input component. And then from October to December, we'll be drafting the document. The steering committee will be developing the themes, developing the strategies. And then at that point in time, the document will be in a draft form and will be available for public input. And the primary way that we do that was we post it to our website, and then people can email me their comments. I might create a little survey form to make it more consistent. And also in January is when the Jeff McCabe's office, the Office of Outdoor Recreation, hosts their Maine Outdoor Economy Summit. I don't know if folks have been to that or have heard of that, that annual conference that they host, but that might be where we launch that as well and have an opportunity for public input. So there's a lot of stakeholders that are at that particular conference. And then from April to June, we'll send it to our editors, get it looking really nice, make it user-friendly, finalize the document, and then we submit it to the National Park Service for approval in July, and then hopefully make any modifications that they request, and then publish it for September 26. And the next draft of SCORP will be dated from 2026 to 2035. So 10 years, it was a nice goal for us to work towards, but I imagine with the changing, climate and economic and political environment, I think that we would probably do some sort of review within that 10-year period to make sure that we're still on target and our themes are still relevant to changes that are happening. So we have that option to revisit at any time, but the next one won't be required to be doing until 2035. And then I'm sure you all have some familiarity with the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but this is sort of the basis of why we have to do SCORP. The requirement for it, in addition to some state requirements, is folks that are interested in applying for Land and Water Conservation Fund money need to identify how they've tied it into statewide outdoor recreation planning. So the LWCF supports close to home recreation opportunities and provides community access to the outdoors. It's helped fund over 46,000 projects in communities and neighborhoods from across the country. And I think we've got plenty of time for me to show you if you haven't had a chance to check out. See if it'll work with my double screens going. Are you seeing a map at all on in your view, Tom?
No, I'm not
No.
seeing one.
Okay, let me see if it's just as easy as me to, how about now?
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is a map you can link from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and I have a link to it in my PowerPoint that I'll share after. And you can go to pretty much any community. If you're not sure if you have Land and Water Conservation Fund, you can go to any community in the state and find out what you have for Land and Water Conservation funded projects. So I'm from the Belfast area, so so you click on it and it'll tell you information about the specific project. So this is kind of a fun tool if you haven't used it already. So looks like a school district applied for funding in 1995 for a track, and so it just tells you really some basic information. So it's kind of a neat tool.
Nicole, can you post that in the chat maybe?
The link to this, yeah,
folks,
sure.
If it just take a second. Yeah, thank you.
Right, no problem. I'm not good at multitasking, so
Yeah, it's all right.
I can't talk and do it at the same time.
I immediately see, I didn't see this map before. I immediately see some dots. I'm like, huh, I wonder what that is. I wonder what that is.
Yeah, this will give you something to do while you're
Yeah.
listening. I don't mind,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly, and this might be a trail system, which is why it's the red dots. But yeah, so it's kind of a neat tool to check out if you haven't seen it yet. And again, important. We have some. It's not my department, but I have resources at the end of the show that I can share with you. But if you're, one of our tennis courts has like a full-grown tree growing out of it, so it's sort of like that one's like out of compliance with what's expected. So again, the projects are supposed to be when you get the funding for land and water conservation project, it's supposed to be for perpetuity and maintained to that usability level for sure. So you can get a sense of what's going on in your communities as you look through this interactive map. All right, should be back to my regular screen here. So land and water conservation fund. You can check out projects in your area. A little bit more about LWCF in case there's anybody that's new or hasn't heard of it. But the funding for LCWF comes. It's not taxpayer money. It actually comes from earnings from offshore oil and gas leasing to help strengthen communities preserve. So it's sort of like they're using high environmental impact, so then they're reinvesting this money back into communities to help protect the national endowment of lands and waters. And LCWF are only eligible for state agencies, counties, municipalities, school districts, and tribal nations. So unfortunately not like organizations or land trusts, but if there's projects that our folks are interested in, oftentimes we'll partner with the town or the state or whatever qualifying agency they're able to work with. And then the maximum grant amount in 2025 is $500,000. There's no minimum award level, but if you're looking for help for smaller projects, so 20,000 or less, the grant managers or the folks in Doug Beck's office can help maybe guide into other funding opportunities that might be a better fit. LWCF grants provide up to 50% of the allowable costs. So sometimes this is a barrier for municipalities or folks that don't have that 50% to match. So say you have a $300,000 accessible trail that you want to put in, but you don't have the 150. So that can sometimes be a barrier for folks, but thinking about that planning ahead of time. And there's, again, like all sorts of grants, there's the ability to find some matching funds. So the folks in our grant office can help navigate that. So how do these two things connect to each other? So SCORP and LCWF is that the state has accessibility stewardship identified as a priority theme. And one of the strategies listed in the SCORP is to reinforce and sustain recreation on private lands. So an LCWF project could be developing universal signage explaining the privilege of public recreation on private lands for posting on trails. So they get funding for projects to help with communication about that. So there's just sort of a way on how here's our theme, here's our strategy, and here's a project that can be communicated through that. And our my favorites, like this is how you get a little bit dorky, a little nerdy. The state planner is, I have my favorite SCORP. So my favorite SCORP is the new Vermont SCORP, and the way that they've written there, it's not only graphically, it's very visually easy to understand. It's not a big chunk of text, but they have a whole list of potential projects for each strategy that they've identified within their SCORP, and that's kind of my vision that I have moving forward for Maine's next SCORP, is to really give people a good sense of what projects could be accomplished through different priorities that we're offering. And Doug Beck is there's some benefit to kind of having broader strategies, and in themes, but there's also some benefit to having more specific themes and strategies. So one of our most successful projects we've had in the last couple of years was a community garden. And if that wasn't mentioned within our scope, it might not have gotten funded. So we have to be careful to kind of keep it broad enough where it's inclusive, but also specific enough where projects that are, will be able to do a lot for community aren't vetted properly because there's not a place for it within the scope. So it's sort of a good balancing point. I've mentioned a few times the Maine's 10-year outdoor recreation economy roadmap. So this is something that I've found myself, most of the presentations that I'm doing related to SCORP are like, well, don't we have that already? And the answer is yes, we do, but it's not under the SCORP umbrella, and it's not tied into the National Park Service. So we do have a 10-year outdoor recreation plan. When I came on, my predecessor, Rex Turner, who some of you might know, was involved in the core committee when I came on. I took over that role, so I've been involved in the planning process for the roadmap since September. So we worked really closely. BPL is a primary partner in this development. So again, I'm doing a lot of explaining as to how is that different than what we already have done. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap. So the roadmap is really focused on the economic impact of outdoor recreation. So as planners in your departments, I think it's a really great resource to help you think about that. A lot of the work that you're doing is how is this going to benefit our communities? How it's the economic benefit of it. So it has that focus, where ours is really the focus is on bringing this federal funding into communities and helping projects that work towards land and water conservation. So a little bit different focus, but a very similar process, very similar timeline, very similar document. And some of our themes we're gonna be overlapping and redundant, and we might just fill in each other's gaps where we're not as focused on economic impact, even though that's looking towards one of our themes moving forward, and they're a little bit less focused on some of the on the ground community impact of the grant funding. So and then we'll have the addition of a statewide trails plan. There's lots of different agencies and organizations that are doing good work towards managing and strategic planning and outdoor recreation. So we have the Maine Trails Coalition. There's what I learned from meeting Granier and the folks in Kennebec Valley is that there's a lot of work going on the ground in the local communities that's doing some outdoor recreation planning, and so I think the communication across these different outdoor recreation planning organizations is going to be really important. So I'm hoping that, again, the Vermont model, my nerdy favorite, SCORP, is they, on their most recent SCORP, they work together with their version of Jeff McCabe's office, the Office of Outdoor Recreation, to develop their SCORP. So my vision moving forwards in our next 10 years is to really hopefully work together and have the SCORP and the roadmap be sort of intertwined and very similar focus. All right. So I've got a little bit of a pause here. So, and you can use either the chat box, or you can feel free to just unmute and speak up. But I'm just wondering, I'm also in this process of presenting to you, trying to learn a little bit more about what you do for work and how you might think SCORP priorities can influence or relate to the work that you're doing on the ground level. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear from you.
I have, getting ready for this, started thinking about one of the things that my brain's always focused on is comprehensive planning. And we have a recreation chapter, and there's requirements in recreation chapters. And I don't know if I've ever seen, we talk about regionalism a lot. This is sort of regionalism on a bigger scale. And I don't think I've ever seen a recreation chapter that mentions anything beyond regional. Like, I've never seen one of these discussed in a municipal comprehensive plan. That's not uncommon in other topic areas too, statewide housing, statewide transportation. So, I mean, it's not that unusual, but I'm just wondering how it could incorporate into the regional discussion about recreation.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Granier.
Hey, I think like we had talked about when you came to our office, one of our big questions, concerns, thought processes is how warming temperatures are going to affect our outdoor recreation, where it's very dependent on seasons, especially ice fishing, snowmobiling, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point.
One question that I had, and it's kind of related to the 10-year recreation plan as well, is there's a strategy in there for strengthening municipality and local planning capacity. And I think that's always something that planning commissions and municipalities are always struggling with. So curious how that goal of increasing capacity and how that might go about.
Yeah, I'm not as intimately. I can't come from off the cuff. I don't think for the roadmap plan, and we're in the process of developing the SCORP. So I think that one thing I can tell you is that I hear you, and that strengthening local capacity is something, and then partly why I wanted to be talking to your organization, because I want that input to hear from folks as to what's important to you and how can this benefit the work that you're doing. So strengthening local capacity for outdoor recreation is, yeah. And a lot of what I'm learning is a lot of towns. I meet with the Maine Recreation and Parks Association, and a lot of towns have parks and rec directors, but some of them don't. They have volunteers, and they have other folks related to the town that are doing that work. So I think when we think about strengthening capacity, I think that two areas that we find a lot of need for are is in the stewardship, so you can have all the great get the money for a capital campaign project, but not necessarily have the stewardship to maintain it at a level that it needs to be operational or benefiting the public. So yeah. Other questions or thoughts, comments? Okay. So what I would like to do next is to hopefully hear from you all. And Greg, I appreciate your question, and I think here's a chance to kind of to get this on the map. Is I'd like to move into sort of more of a focus group discussion with folks. So I have a list of 5 questions. And what I'm going to do is I'd like to move through the questions, and we can hear folks that are feeling brave enough or are able to be engaged enough where they can respond verbally, or you can use the chat function, meeting chat function, or if you another option would be I can send you a quick little survey afterwards, and you can fill out the survey to the best of your ability to make sure we can hear your voices. So 5 questions I'm going to run through, and Granier mentioned on how changing weather patterns are going to be impacting recreational opportunities. So that would be some examples of things that answers that we're looking for information. And before I move into that, I just want to kind of be really transparent about the focus group, is that this is an invitation to participate. So by sharing responses, you agree to have responses. I'm going to be taking notes and shared with SCORP planners. I'm not going to associate specific answers to specific people. So it's going to be recorded anonymously. Participation is voluntary. And then responses you can share again. You can share it, and you can do the chat, or you can email them to me. If you're welcome to sort of, if you're, again, I know some of you might be multitasking or doing other things as this webinar is going on. You're welcome to stay on if you're like, I don't want to be part of this focus group. I'm also okay with if you wanted to move on as well. So so that's sort of a little bit about focus group before we go into that part here. So we're starting with question 1, which is, what themes or trends are you noticing in Maine-based recreation? And when we think about focus group, you can answer any, there's not going to be any wrong answer, but part of the benefit of me having access to this particular audience is to hear from your perspective. So from this municipal planning perspective. So So open invitation to answer any direction that you want, but I'd love to hear how it, what you think from your perspective. So themes or trends you're noticing in Maine-based recreation.
For the sake of never having something, oh, sorry, somebody's in chat there. Higher visitation, especially at already highly visited places. And
Okay.
one thing that comes to mind is it wasn't too long ago you could just go hike Katahdin or you could drive up Cadillac, and now you can't just go do that on a whim.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a little bit more of this planning. Those are great, very specific, good examples. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Eric,
Well,
I see here.
those were from chat.
Oh, from the chat. Okay.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. Erica.
I was thinking of it in the sense of how, recreation then hand in hand kinds of affects housing as well, and the short-term rental existence and everything of that nature. Just seeing how that affects certain areas where there's, really good opportunities for outdoor recreation, how that does kind of fall into then affecting housing, et cetera, et cetera. So just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah. So people, renting out to more short-term rentals and less long-term rentals for folks that are working in that industry. Great, thanks. That's a great example. And that's there's a group of folks looking up at the Moosehead area right now, and they've just got some funding to provide housing, long-term housing as well. So I think that's something moving forward that we want to be thinking of as well. Okay. So looks like we heard increased use of interactive maps. Okay, that's another trend. Interactive maps. Right. Those fewer secret spots. So my very well Maine used gazetteer with all my favorite fishing holes, is yeah. And so it's in some of those interactive maps. So I'm a Strava user, and I think some of the other mapping apps do that. But you can see heat maps, so you can see where even if they're private profiles on these sort of most social media type interactive maps that you can see where people are going. Yeah, so you can kind of letting that cat out of the bag for secret spots. Any other
The only thing that
thoughts?
comes to mind, I'm not even sure how to verbalize this, but it's just a national trend, I think. But it seems, and this is kind of like starting to become an old person talking here, but it seems like vacations are researched more. I mean, people from away are coming to Maine, they're researched more. There's more online resources. The idea of having a gazetteer and driving to a little waterfall symbol to go see what it looks like are over. Now people already know what it's going to look like, right? So it's more destination oriented, and commercialized, good or bad. It's just changing the way, and this is nationally too, I think. When a campground shows up on Down East Magazine, 2 years ago, it now becomes one of the most highly visited campgrounds in the state of Maine, even though it's 20 miles from the Canadian border. Um, so that kind of influence is amplified now, it seems. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then the loss of use of private property. So most of Maine is, as you all know, is privately owned. So so it makes it particularly vulnerable when we can lose that. Yeah. Let's see. Newer property owners are limiting access and privatizing land. That's another great point. Okay. And the current property owners limiting access due to incompatible uses, right? So they would allow hikers, but they maybe not want ATV or snowmobilers. Yeah, great. Thanks for that input. So If you think of good things as we're moving along, or somebody else responds to, you can just say, this is question 1 related to trends, trends and themes. So you can put question 1, and you can continue to put answers in this question. But we'll move on to our next question, which is, what opportunities do you foresee for outdoor recreation in Maine in the next 5 to 10 years? So again, we're thinking strategic planning from a 10-year perspective. So what are some opportunities that you foresee within the state?
What types of opportunities, like, are you more looking, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of an open-ended question, like opportunities to expand offerings or opportunities to increase economic benefits, or kind of like, that's a big question.
Yeah, yes, the answer is yes, either of those. So one example, so Grania mentioned, we are we're getting less and less snow every winter. We're seeing some changing weather patterns. So that while we see that as a challenge to certain industries, it's also an opportunity. So Sugarloaf just put in a pretty, what looks like a pretty fun mountain bike park. So they have this amazing mountain bike trail system, but now they have this kind of more of like a play park that they just put in. So they're finding ways, opportunities to drive people to that area off season, you know, and so these longer shoulder seasons. So that would be one example of an opportunity. Yeah.
Granier says glamping, agritourism.
Agritourism. Yeah. Agritourism and glamping. Water-based recreation, so fishing, swimming, boating, potentially seeing greater efforts to make private access more public. Yeah, so there's some legislation that's going through or that's in consideration related to more making sure private access to more public access to more private areas. Great. So another type of opportunity could be programmatic, like if you sort of programming as well. Yeah, Joan, seeing your pop up.
Yeah, I just have an anecdote. I was looking at one of the Facebook pages that people in my town have created, and must be a new resident, but somebody posted, does anybody have any favorite fishing spots? And the comments essentially were yes.
Yep. I can tell you my second and my third favorite fishing spots, but you're not going to get my top 3 or my top 1.
Get any. No, I agree with the comments that are being made. This is what we've been hearing also, especially on the coast. I think it was Greg that said that loss of the use of private property to access water. As new owners come in and don't want people on their property. So a community that may not have a public beach residents may have an access right now just because of the generosity of private property owners.
So are you seeing that's being so there's an opportunity to secure more public access?
Potentially. And the other thing that I think about is with an increase in visitors, especially to smaller communities or ends of peninsulas, what are the traffic impacts? Are we seeing, or are we likely to start to see congestion on local roads or at the ends of peninsulas, or even if they're state roads, but or the bridged islands? How many vehicles can we accommodate, and do we have adequate transportation network, road widths, paved shoulders for non-motorized use?
I'm an avid mountain biker, and people are like, how do you do that? It's so scary. I'm like, I would put me on a trail away from cars any day, or over driving on a road without a shoulder or a bike lane.
Yeah. which hazards are the most hazardous.
Yeah. So a few more things popping up in the chat. Communities trying to figure out how to benefit both property owners and the public when it comes to allowing greater public access on trails or also private property. Yeah, so it's kind of, sometimes it can be a hard sell. Oftentimes they don't realize the benefit of having people on their property. Strain on public facilities as well, like EMS and police. Yeah, especially in these more remote areas. And balancing short-term rentals and the need for traditional rentals. Yeah. Great. These are all really good topics. All right. Again, if you think of things as we keep going or get inspired by other things that you hear, please feel free to add your comments in the chat room. And we're going to go on to our next question. What challenges do you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years that might impact outdoor recreation? So a lot of times this goes hand in hand with our opportunities questions. And it's okay to be redundant. So if you're like, well, we kind of just talked about the opportunities and they often go hand in hand with our challenges, but any specific challenges that you're seeing in your areas or related to municipal planning? So public buses and transit. So that'd be under recreational opportunities. Yeah. So challenges related to outdoor recreation. So we've talked a little bit about the private access to private lands, transportation, housing.
I think overcrowding was mentioned,
Overcrowding.
just sort of generalizing it.
Mm-hmm. Changing weather and pattern, changing seasons. You hear from folks anything related to the kind of public health concerns or challenges, or like tick-borne diseases, or is that something you hear from folks that you work with? Oh, sea level, that's a great one. This winter wasn't as bad as the last winter we had. I live in Belfast, so every new moon we'd go down to the coast. Sure enough, there's some scary sea level rising with those storms in particular. Sea level rising and flooding. Tourist and year-round residents, right? Health services and invasive species. Two really good points. Economic hardships for towns that rely on snow sports with less snowfall. Yeah. And I think tied into that is I know that, the area that I live in, we didn't get a lot of snow, but I'd go up to Millinocket and there was great snow for cross country ski and friends that snowmobile. And so they were moving towards kind of overcrowding certain areas like Rangeley and, Jackman, an area where they had some good snow. So wasn't snow around the state, but there's very specific areas where the snow was good. So we saw hardship for certain areas, but then also kind of that same problem with the impact and overcrowding on areas that were getting good snow. Rural residents are complaining of lack of stewardship. Yeah. It's come up in other focus groups, but people have been mentioning they're seeing a decrease in volunteerism in their areas and in their groups. So not sure if I'm not going to include it, but if folks are hearing about that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how volunteerism, if you're noticing any volunteerism shifts. Cost increases limiting participation for low-income population. Yes. Okay. And related to increased flood risk, roads are getting washed out, limiting access to recreational areas. Mm-hmm. We actually found that we had a training this morning, and originally over by the Androscoggin Riverlands, and originally we thought the parking lot was closed because it was washed out. So even on our own properties, we're seeing that All right. Let's leave another minute or so for challenge, like anything responses related to challenges. So availability of employees, particularly an example of rafting guides, affordability of recreational equipment. Yeah. I had the opportunity this winter to make it over to, oh, I can't think of, I'm blanking on Medway. There's some, I'm blanking on the name. Some cross-country skiing that's, it'll come to me at some point. That's open to the public for free. And they had free rentals right at the facility, and it wasn't stationed by anybody. Staff wasn't even there, so it's just sort of like this: help yourself and return it, and honesty policy, which was really nice to see. Certainly not accessible to everybody.
Nicole, one thing that I heard before I started working with the state 3 years ago, I worked for Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, which includes the Franklin County ski mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I was hearing as a transportation planner were Hi, Erica. Erica's in that role now. Challenges in terms of employment from the ski resorts because they weren't able to bring in the foreign student employees because of federal regulations. There were limits on the visas that were available, and a lot of them were taken up in the state of Maine in the summer season. So come winter, there weren't enough of those permits, visas, whatever they were, available. So maybe it's a question for Erica. Erica, are you still hearing that? Is that still an issue?
Yes, I think so. And a lot of it too, why I brought up housing is that it's hard to retain people to work there when housing is so expensive that their income isn't really meeting where they are. So they just have that gap. And okay, you might go and work in Carrabassett Valley, but you might not be able to afford to live there. So you're, commuting from an hour plus to get there for work just because there's not housing available. So I think that's led into a little bit of a shortage there too.
And another component of that was particularly for the foreign workers coming in, they're coming in without vehicles.
Yeah.
So the transportation to get from where they're able to afford to live, if they can at all, to the work site was a limitation.
And the lack of, a lot of public transportation in that area then further exacerbates that issue that John just said.
Mm-hmm. Great. Good information. All right. I saw that I have a friend that's a hotel manager on the coast, and he for every weekend for a month he called me and, can you come cater? I've never catered in my life. He's just like, because they weren't able to get the visas for the people that usually come and work, so they were stuck with their unskilled labor coming in, in terms of me being that person. So I thought on the hotel end of things as well. All right, so question 4, what resources are needed to make Maine a premier state for outdoor recreation? So the outdoor recreation roadmap, that's one of their goals, is to make Maine a premier destination point for outdoor recreation. So what are some resources, again, from your perspective or just in general, that would make Maine a premier state for outdoor recreation?
I guess another clarifying question, and I keep asking them and this comes from my decade or so at Land for Maine's Future. Does this could be answered 20 different ways for 20 different interests in recreation. It could be you could climb cliffs, or you could, walk on a beach, right? We're like two extremes. Like premier for all, 80 possibilities or hundreds of possibilities of types of recreation. I mean, it could be cruise ship passengers, right? I mean, it could just be such a varied It could be answered so many. My head's kind of blowing up because there's so many. It's such a open-ended. I know you're going to say all the above, and it's frustrating because it's like you want to make a list of 100 different possible tourists that would come, right? Or recreation users, including locals, obviously. I'm always trying to, I don't mean to exclude the locals, but anyway, sorry, I just kind of bombed your question there a little bit.
Yeah. So if I like, I'm gonna be careful from the focus group facilitation process, but it could be opportunities that cater to a diverse array of recreational users, both resident and non-resident. so that could be kind of, that could be a type of response where we have a little something for everybody.
So it could be expanding the airport. It could be, it could be adding a lane to I-95.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Oh. Yeah.
Let's see. So we have opportunities that are accessible to residents. So accessibility.
I'll just hop on the accessibility train coming from someplace that had a very plentiful network of trains. It was one of the biggest barriers in coming to Maine is it's just hard to get everywhere in comparison to what I was used to. And that's me, I'm from away. And another thing is signage. It's just always one of those things that I feel like, I know we want to, there are certain places we don't want to really just say, yeah, everybody go to that spot right now. But I think if anything, sometimes it allows it to be a little more functional because people know where to go instead of like looking around like, where should I be parking here? Which then causes a bunch of other issues as they're trying to figure out what's going on. So, I know there's certain areas I go into and I'm like, wow, the signage is great. I know, they're giving me indications that something's up the mile in a few ways and not just off of this random side street. So I do think the wayfinding does help a lot too.
I want to second what Erica said only because I am from here, so I can give credence. I have wanted to have trains since I was a little girl. My grandmother told me stories about how there used to be well and accessible trains between, places like Milo and Bangor and Portland. And as a result, the population, just the local populations, used to be much more evenly dispersed rather than the concentrations we're increasingly seeing now.
Yeah. Some good points in the discussion. A local appetite for premier travel destinations. So that says a lot, certainly. So really good point. I didn't want to make sure we didn't miss statewide public transport, a non-collapsing healthcare system, education and outreach to landowners. Yeah, good, really great points. So. Outdoor gear retailers.
I hope you don't mind me jumping back in on this. So down south, I'm from Bangor, by the way, Eastern Maine Development Corporation. There is a collective. I'm pretty sure most people are aware of them by now. They're a gear share collective called Kindling. And they're almost like a gear library where you can, and there are efforts to make this happen statewide for tourism efforts, but having that availability maybe through a library or a local nonprofit that will just rent out gear or even loan it for free for people who just want to dabble in outdoor recreation and maybe decide if they want to buy a canoe or skis or something. It'd be a really great idea.
Yeah. What was the name of the specific collective you mentioned, Hope?
The Kindling Collective. They're actually doing this weekend they're doing I think it's a outdoor safety course for free for people.
Great. And that's in the Bangor area?
That's actually in Portland.
In Portland. Okay. Great.
I'll link it in the chat.
Thanks. Yeah. I think it's good to have some resources. More focus groups to encourage discussion between different user groups. Okay. So water users, trail users, etc. Okay. And Skowhegan Outdoors also a gear library that does the same for Somerset County residents throughout Main Street, Skowhegan. Yeah. Christina does an amazing job. the Skowhegan Main Street group. Yeah, thanks. There's the kindling project collection. Great. Okay. Any other thoughts on how to make Maine a premier state for outdoor recreation? This one might also drive you crazy, Tom, too. So, let's see. Question 5. What do you recommend should be top priorities for Maine related to outdoor recreation? What specific to your area? Sorry, I put in this late last night, so with some typos in there, but I'll just speak it out. So what do you recommend should be a top priority for Maine related to outdoor recreation? And if there's anything specific to the area, to your area of the state? So what are some top priorities? So what would you like to see in the next version of SCORP listed as our priorities? And it can be information that you've already shared if you just want to make sure it gets kind of drilled into that point. So we've come up a lot of these have come up already, but
I think a lot of it has to be outreach and education. That it's sort of like, it reminds me of this past summer and probably the last couple summers. There's been press releases put out. Basically, summarizing it, it would be a press release saying, don't hike Tumble Down Mountain, right? You hike these other peaks instead, right? Or, you know, and you've been seeing that forever for Katahdin, you know, here are some other mountains you might be interested in. And it's like, it's sometimes people will just go to the thing they know. And there's so many places, 99% of the places that we have available aren't being used nearly at all. And so I think letting, you know, residents and visitors know what's out there. So the coastal program years ago put out a coastal access guide. It was intended to be all public access points to the ocean. And it's I mean, it was a huge step, but you know, or the online resources for conservation lands, or you know, Maine Trail Finder and those kinds of things. You know, I just think that education, it's we have the resources. It's just we don't want to keep everyone from going to the same spot on the same day.
So ways to promote sort of those underused areas. Yeah. Sounds like encouraging diversity and recreational opportunities came in from Greg. So what should Maine have as our priorities? All right. So either we've already said it or we're running out of juice. So I'll follow up with a little survey for folks to, if you thought of some good things after the fact and you want to continue to add them, we can continue to hear your perspective and get your input on our strategic plan moving forward. Thanks for the folks. I really appreciate the engagement. I know it's sometimes hard in this format, and I appreciate folks that are willing to share. Okay, good. We did get a little information in for Eastport, more of a collaboration with tribal members for local cultural tourism if they wanted to. Yeah, that's a great area specific. All right, so from here, I just want to share a little bit about some of the resources that I have posted. So I have the LCWF in Maine, and that will link you to that interactive map that I shared earlier. History, just general information of the LCWF. The Maine SCORP requirements, so it'll bring you to the website, kind of talking about some of the requirements from SCORP that I mentioned. The current Maine SCORP, so that was created by my predecessor, Rex Turner, and in his steering committee. So you can see what we currently have listed as our priorities. The Maine Outdoor Economy Roadmap, so referenced that a bunch, and you can see what their strategic planning is. And then And then SCORP Outdoor Recreation Provider Survey. So this is a survey that's open. I think that's how Grenier learned that I was connected to this project, and so somehow got on her radar about the provider survey. So if that's something that if you feel like you're connected enough to outdoor recreation, or if you're manager at outdoor recreation, you can look through the survey and see if you're the right person to answer it, or please share it with other folks. So that'll be out until September. So we're taking some time to collect information from that and any help you can provide for that survey getting out when the other one comes out. And I'm sure all of you have some interest in outdoor recreations, whether it's walking your dog or hiking Katahdin. So we'd love to hear from you as well when the next survey comes out. And then keep an eye out in December or January. You can certainly contact me at any point in time if you have questions where we are in the process or what's going on. But in January, we'll have the new SCORP posted on our website, and you can have opportunities for some public input there, and I'll try to promote that through our newsletter and other resources as well. So that's what I have for today. Again, I really appreciate the focus group input, and I appreciate the captive audience for the other components and learning and getting to talk a little bit more about our SCORP planning process.
Thank you, Nicole. So if folks have questions, reach out to Nicole anytime. Just a reminder that our next webinar will be on Friday, June 6th. Opening up about open space, a panel discussion on open space planning in Maine. Please send any, thank you, Grenier, for the suggestion of today's topic, and feel free to send any future ones. We'll be meeting in June, and then we take July off, and then we'll start back up in August. If nobody has anything else, thank you, Nicole. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This was a great discussion today.